What's going on, everyone? Thanks for tuning in to another episode of the Ducks Dish podcast. Oregon fans, it has been a wild week and weekend with that crazy 44-41 win over the Washington State Cougars on the road in Pullman, Martin Stadium. Man, what a game it was. And joining me to break it all down here is my guy, Mark Wang. And man, we got a whole bunch to talk about. We're going to get into our takeaways from the game. But before we do that, want to give a big thank you to you guys for tuning in. For those of you guys that are here in the live stream, you guys can, just a reminder, you can catch the podcast on YouTube. YouTube.com/Oregon Football Max Torres is where you can do that. Reminder to like, subscribe, and share the Ducks Dish podcast. It is a tremendous help, and we always appreciate all the support. But with all that out of the way, Mark, how the heck are you, man? Great to see you.
I'm doing real good. Life's going. School's about to start back up here at Oregon. So cannot complain. Things are about to get more interesting around here with all the students back.
Yeah, no, it's crazy how the quarter system. When I was there for the game against Eastern Washington earlier this month, it was wild that there wasn't that much going on. There weren't that many students there, but Oregon football has a funny way of attracting the students back maybe a little bit earlier than they need to. But dude, let's just kind of break it down and kind of just get into this off the top. Well, what were some of your kind of initial takeaways after having a chance to watch the game, and then kind of let things process a little bit here in the last 24 hours?
I will have to say my prediction was wrong in the fact that I thought Oregon was going to lose, even though they probably should have lost that game at the end there. But I was right about the fact that it was 3 points. And 44-41 Oregon over Washington State. That was insane. I think that just really showed that this Oregon offense can step up when it needs to, that they can drive down the field, cap off those big drives in order to get those touchdowns, which they needed against this Washington State team. Yes, emotional roller coaster indeed. And I mean, you just saw a lot of how gritty this Oregon offense is. How, quite frankly, still I think of a problem this defense is, or at least the secondary. Giving up 41 points is one thing. Giving up 41 points is one thing. Giving up 41 points and having it be this close of a game is another thing entirely. So there's a lot that we can take from this game. A lot of both good and bad.
Yeah, well, let's start with the good, right? We don't want to be, negative, but we do want to be critical when it's appropriate. And I think there's definitely some of those we can get into here in this episode of the pod. But I think that what you said about the offense is a great place to start, because Oregon was in a hole in that fourth quarter. And what a fourth quarter it was. Ducks rattled off 29 points in the fourth to come back and win this one in thrilling fashion. But Mark, I mean, after watching this game, it kind of just made me think a little bit. If Oregon was in this situation a year ago, 2 years ago, heck, anytime under Mario Cristobal, I feel like you really didn't find yourself having a lot of confidence when the Oregon offense was going back out there, whether it be 2 minute, or 2.5 minute, whatever it is, short amount of time. I don't think as an Oregon fan you could be tuned into the game and be like, oh yeah, no, like the offense has this, we can just push the ball down the field, get a couple of these, quick outs for 10, 15 yards a pop, manage the clock properly. That's another huge improvement I think that we've seen. But that was kind of one of the big takeaways that I just wanted to get into with you mentioning the offense coming up really big. And then obviously we're going to talk about the defense and Mace Funa's game-sealing pick six at the end there. But yeah, I just had to we have to give some props and some kudos to the offense, because both sides of the ball really face some adversity. But I think that the offense continues week in and week out to prove that they're the strong suit and the strength of this team.
Yeah, I mean, I heard Coach Lanning in his post game presser say that like the offense carried the defense that day. I never thought I would hear that from a defensive minded head coach. But I mean, hey, you never know. It's like we would say, always something interesting in college football. And kind of going off of what you said there, Max, with about the whole offense, maybe not having as much hope in the offense under like say Mario. Um, I remember twice when Oregon played Wazoo when I was here when I was a student. There was the one time in Pullman when it was on game day, and then there was the next year in Autzen. Uh, the first time Oregon was in a hole, and they almost did come back, but then yes, you're right. Mario got cute with the play calling, wasn't able to take advantage of that. And the second time, I believe it was Camden Lewis. Camden Lewis iced it on the last play of the game. Not gonna lie, I had a minor heart attack during that game and during that moment. But I mean, this offense, yeah, they absolutely showed what they could do. I think really Troy Franklin and Bo Nix showed that and even Bucky Irving too. They showed they're the catalysts of this offense, and that they're really helping to power this engine to go, because Troy Franklin has far and away put himself up as the number one option, at least receiving wise, for Oregon.
Yeah. So let's talk about, I mean, just to shed some light on the numbers that Oregon had here in this game. And then I think we definitely need to talk about the offense more specifically. We can get into Bo, we can get into the passing game. But final numbers for Oregon: 624 yards of total offense generated in this one against the Cougs. Not terribly efficient on third down, just 4 for 11 for Oregon, but they did, I think, maybe make up for some of that with some huge fourth down conversions, 2 for 2 on fourth down in this game. 178 yards on the ground, averaging 5.6 yards per carry. Definitely got to give a shout out to the offensive line again. They just continue to show up. This was one of the better fronts that they faced. I think that they probably entered this matchup having a load of confidence after running the ball on BYU like they did a week ago in Eugene. And then, we got to get into these numbers for Bo Nix, because Bo is definitely getting a lot of talk here. As this comment says, Bo Nix was the right QB choice. # Bo Lever is what Apollo 28 says here in the chat. I believe he likes to stop by the show. So good to see you again, Apollo. So yeah, Mark, Bo Nix, 33 for 44, 428 yards, 3 touchdowns, and an interception that really came at a pretty bad time, but 9.7 yards per pass. I mean, the pick is obviously going to be what he is criticized for. That's nothing new. I mean, right? Like, that's like something that Bo Nix has been criticized for since he was at Auburn. But the way that he bounced back from that pick and the way that the offense responded after having kind of a pretty iffy first half, I think says a lot about this team, and it says a lot about Bo and the growth that he's made even since coming to Oregon.
I agree. Yeah. I remember seeing the highlights of that pick six plays. Is like throwing interception is bad. It's bad. Throwing a pick six on the road is even worse. And I remember watching that game and seeing the halftime score, and I was like, if Bo hadn't thrown that pick six and everything else had played out as it was, this would have been a lot close. That game would have been a lot closer at the end of that first half. But then, yeah, you're right. The offense showed up, and I remember very first drive of the second half, Oregon comes out, gets the ball, drives it down the field, and scores a touchdown quick, fast, and in a hurry. And I think at that point they pulled it within, I think, 2 or something like that for Oregon, and that just showed that this was a team that is now really able to take your best hit, come back up, and respond. I mean, this was, I think, this was for Oregon the biggest game since the Georgia game, I think. And that's no disrespect to BYU, but BYU did not play like a number 12 team when they were up in Eugene. They did not. But I think in terms of like games aside from that, yeah, this was the biggest game for Oregon, and it was a road game, and they went to a very tough place to play out on the Palouse, and they came up big.
Yeah. So just to stay on Bo, because he just had a crazy performance. I think this was a huge game for him because he responded to adversity, but even more so because it was on the road. I think that was the history that we've seen from Bo Nix just over his collegiate career has been a totally different quarterback at home versus on the road. And I talked to Andrew Quinn about that when we were doing our Washington State preview podcast last week. And for him to show up the way he did, I think this was one of those games, probably not even the first, but maybe the first game where we could really definitively say, aside from the pick six, that looks like, a veteran quarterback, like a 4-year starter. He had some really nice ball placement in this game, which I don't think is something that we've said too much about this season, because I don't think Bo has the most impressive arm. I don't think he's going to blow you away. I think a lot of people probably think, and I would probably agree with them, that Ty Thompson has the strongest arm on this team. But the way that Bo Nix was pushing the ball down the field was awesome. I feel like we're saying that each week, which is why it's so exciting to watch this offense again. You had the 50-yard touchdown pass to Troy Franklin. Also had a really good connection with Chase Cota this game. Really nice to see him appearing in this one. Dante Thornton had a deep pass along the sideline. So Bo in this game, just really made his presence felt, and he only rushed for 30 yards. So I think to see him do so much of the damage with his arm was yet another encouraging sign for this Oregon team.
Yeah, he looked really, really good out there. I'll admit I did not see the whole game. I was working for the first half of it, but I mean, from all that I saw, like Bo went out and did basically what he was brought in to do. Kind of get another spark going for this team, looking to be kind of in a win now mode with a new system, with a new head coach who was just off of a national championship when he was at Georgia for Coach Lanning. And just Bo Nix has really, I think, shown Oregon a lot of, or has been for Oregon fans a lot of what they wish that they were able to see Justin Herbert do. Air the ball out, show off that arm, and show off just the talent with this receiving core. And when you're able to do that, and you also have a really solid running game, led by Bucky Irving and Noah Whittington, that's a combination that's going to lead to a lot of success.
Yeah, no, that running game has been such a great compliment. Like, Oregon's had a strong running game, obviously, for a really long time, but it felt like it was being held back a little bit. Like it feels like it's going up a notch because they finally have a passing game that can play off of that and that can keep the defenses guessing, that maybe makes it harder to stack the box with your defenders in these games, because Oregon finally has a quarterback that can hurt you, that can push the ball down the field, and an offensive play caller that is willing to take some risks. And I think that's one thing that is definitely warranted some discussion. But I did want to get to this question, last question on Bo before we moved on to talk about some other parts of the offense and definitely the defense, because this is an interesting question from Apollo. How do you guys feel if Bo stayed for another year? I feel like it could cause some transfers, but year 2 of Nix and Dillingham and Eugene would be great. This is an interesting question, Mark, because we've reached a point in the season where we have a strong enough sample size to ask these types of questions. The Georgia game was Georgia, right? I think that we can all admit that at this point, that game said more about Georgia being just dominant on another level, reloaded, not rebuilt. continuity, like whatever you want to call it, Georgia has it. But that game said more about Georgia than where Oregon's at now. And I think with Bo having played 3 really strong games, I don't really think you can say much about Eastern Washington, but he does have 2 years of eligibility remaining because he played in 19, 20, and 21. So that's 3 years. And then you knock one of those off for COVID. So this is technically his third of 4 collegiate years of eligibility. And he hurt his ankle last year. So I'm not 100% sure specifically how that factors in. But looking at the talent that Oregon has on the roster, you have Ty Thompson, who I think has all the potential in the world, but for all intents and purposes, he just doesn't look ready yet. I'm not trying to criticize him, but he's someone who it looks like right now isn't going to be able to take that next step he needs to take unless he can play more games and get more snaps. And then Jay Butterfield, I mean, it just looks like they're favoring Ty over Jay. And then you have Dante Moore coming in the 23 class. But I don't know. I think that I have been of the mindset that you want to develop a guy. We were talking about it, a homegrown guy, someone you recruit out of the prep ranks and you can have for multiple years because I think that's healthier for a program. But because of COVID and the transfer situation that Oregon has found themselves in right now with the quarterback position specifically, you have the opportunity, if Bo does want to stay, to have some continuity at quarterback, something that Oregon hasn't had since Justin Herbert was here.
Yeah, I agree with that. I agree that it would cause transfers. I think Jay Butterfield would definitely transfer out if Bo Nix decided to stay. And then I think, in all honesty, that could then have a battle for the number 2 spot between Dante Moore and Ty Thompson. And then I think if Dante Moore were to win that, Ty Thompson could potentially transfer out as well. So you could potentially lose or have 2 of the guys transfer out instead of just the one. But I do agree with the fact that having Bo stay would provide continuity for the offense. Bring a lot of those guys back. Have another year to kind of keep building on that, because I think that would be amazing, and that would be what Oregon needed. Because you're right, we haven't seen a consistent multi-year starter since Justin Herbert, and before that, Mariota. So Oregon has a tendency to sometimes go like a bit of a chunk of time, 2 or so years in between every major starter quarterback. So I don't know if that would be Ty Thompson and then Dante Moore, or if it would just be Dante Moore if Bo Nix were to stay another year. So I don't know. I also agree with you. I don't think that Ty Thompson is fully ready. I think what we saw in the Eastern Washington game was a good team beating up on a not great team in Eastern Washington. Because when Ty Thompson got put in the third quarter against BYU, I believe it was probably 2 3-and-outs at least, and I think an interception too. So when he got put up against that strong BYU team, he didn't exactly have the best success. So I do think he needs time to be able to develop.
Yeah, and I think that you'll find that for most quarterbacks. Like, quarterback's probably the hardest position in all of college football, you could argue, to come in and play right away. So it's an interesting deal with Bo to see if it makes sense to have him come back another year, if he even wants to come back another year. Because I'm assuming when he made this decision, I haven't been told this, I don't have any sources on this, but I'm assuming when he made this decision, it was come to Oregon, have an awesome year, up my draft stock, and then go on to the NFL, take my shot in the NFL. But I feel like this kind of creates a new wrinkle in the future of this Oregon team, because it feels like Oregon's kind of been one quarterback away. Like, you could probably group them in that category for teams because they haven't had a vertical passing attack. They haven't had an offense that can give them points on the board when they need it in crunch time. So I think it's a really interesting discussion, and we're going to have to continue following it. So appreciate the question from Apollo there. But just to give some final thoughts on the offense, Mark, I don't want to rush through the show too much, but We are trying to get through this game before our Niners play on Sunday Night Football against the Denver Broncos. But we got to talk about the running game and this offensive line. Oregon is now the only team in all of college football, and at the FBS level at least, that hasn't allowed a sack through 4 games. They just plowed ahead with this awesome group of backs. And Bucky Irving, it seems like we really do have a solid idea of what the rotation is going to look like. We didn't see Byron Cardwell on Saturday. It kind of looked like he was a game time decision for Oregon. He was practicing throughout the week, but looked like I think he had tweaked his ankle or something. But Bucky Irving looks like that solid number 1, and dude can run, and it's not easy to get that guy down. He also showed that he can be versatile and contribute in the passing game. Had a really big catch that I think someone was talking about in the comments on 4th down that Bo just threaded in there. And then Noah Whittington comes in to spell him. And then Jordan James, the true freshman that Carlos Laughlin recruited, flipped from Georgia late in the 22 cycle. He scores his first touchdown at the college level as a Duck, and he's kind of established himself as this short yardage guy. So 3rd down, 4th down guy. So I think that it's awesome to see this Oregon running game continue to do what they do. And Oregon's offensive line is, I think it's solidly in the top 5 in the country at this point. And keep in mind, that's without Stephen Jones. That's with Marcus Harper II sliding in. And this group doesn't miss a beat. So hats off to them. And absolutely a huge hats off to Adrian Clem and his offensive line staff as we kind of wind down our discussion of the offense in this Washington State game.
I agree. Absolutely. You know, when you have that continuity on the offensive line, even with a few tweaks here and there, when you have those veteran guys who are able to go in and really bond together. I remember Justin Herbert's last year. That was another big thing, is that you had a group of guys who had been together for all 4 years and really developed, and they were touted as one of the best lines in the country. This is the same case. I think you have a really solid group of guys who are able to come together, really be able to protect your quarterback, open up the holes for the running game, and really open up this offense. You know, and that's been such an important part of that. I mean, like the fact that they haven't allowed a sack through 4 games, and you played Georgia, for crying out loud. You played Georgia and you didn't allow a sack. You played a decent BYU team, didn't allow a sack. You played Washington State in Pullman with a circus score of 44-41 and don't allow a sack. Like, that's huge. That's huge for Bo Nix's confidence. That's huge for the running backs, and that's huge for the team overall, because when you're able to keep the quarterback upright and be able to let the running back get through the holes, that's a recipe for success.
Absolutely, it is. It is. And it's funny because you got animated there when you were talking about Georgia and not allowing a sack in that game. That was like one of the few positives you could take from that game at all. And then it's like, oh, hey, let's like fast forward through the rest of the month, and that trend's continued. So I think that, I mean, talk about a test for your, new offensive line coach. Getting that against Georgia is just nuts. But we're going to take a quick break here on the Ducks Dish podcast. For those of you listening to us on the audio platform, don't go anywhere. We're going to be breaking down the Oregon defense against Washington State after this. Welcome back to the Ducks Dish podcast. I'm your host, Max Torres. That's Mark Wang, and we are continuing with our breakdown of Oregon versus Washington State. Now we're going to be flipping to the other side of the ball. We got to be talking about the Oregon defense. Just to get into some of the notes that we have from this one. Season high, 11 tackles for loss, the most by Oregon in a game since having 11 against UCLA last season. Season high, 4 sacks, which is also the most that Oregon's had since last year against UCLA. And then held Washington State to just 163 total yards in the first half, an average of 6 yards a play, and then got 2 takeaways in this one, while you get your second defensive touchdown of the season, with Mace Funa's pick 6 at the end of this one. Mark, I think that it was a real tough test for this Oregon team, because we knew going into this game that Cameron Ward was a really talented quarterback. I think maybe some people had written him off a little bit because he came from Incarnate Word, put up insane numbers there at the FCS level, but we heard Lanning talk about it. We heard some players like Jordan Riley talk about it. Football is football, man. So they did not take this matchup lightly, and it's a good thing that they didn't, because he had quite the day, 37 for 48 with 375 yards and 2 touchdowns, but he threw 2 interceptions, and they got him down on the ground for 4 sacks in this one. So I think that that's probably one of the biggest takeaways positively from this game for Oregon from a defensive standpoint, is that you're finally able to get some pressure on the quarterback. And it looks like, at least from the box score, that it really started with DJ Johnson, who got 2 sacks in this one. So love to see some improved effort and, improved results ultimately from this front seven.
If you ever had a game where you wanted to have your defensive line step up and start hitting the quarterback, this was the time. That was huge for Oregon. We want to get the QB down on the ground, make his life more difficult, and say, it's like, hey, you're gonna have to earn everything you get today. And then, yeah, the secondary we can talk about a little bit later, because that's a whole nother discussion topic. But I mean, DJ Johnson getting those two big hits, that's huge. And then the pick six at the end of the game, right place, right time, jumped up, able to snag it out, and then run it back to ice the game. Like, I remember seeing that, or like seeing the thing that pop up. It's like interception, return for touchdown. I'm like, are you kidding me? Wow. Okay. Because I think, yeah, they needed that to ice that game, because I think if they hadn't gotten that, Wazoo was very capable of marching down the field and either tying that game up or winning the thing outright, because they're a good team. I mean, they were a good team, and they were feeding off that sellout crowd in Pullman all day.
Yeah, we already knew going into this game that it was going to be a great atmosphere out at Martin Stadium. So we tried to, everyone kind of talked about that, the various Oregon outlets, and then I talked about it on, my podcast. But another storyline from this one, Noah Sewell probably had his best statistical game of the year. We all know how special Noah is, but it felt like he just hadn't been making as big of an impact as we maybe expected early on in the season through the previous 3 games. But 9 total tackles in this game. He had 1 of the 4 sacks, 2.5 tackles for loss. And then we also saw Justin Flo in this game. Didn't play against BYU, but he was able to come back in this one. 7 total tackles for Flo and a tackle for loss. So seems like we're seeing some more of that, that 1-2 punch, that dynamic duo at linebacker starting to make more of an impact now. But before we talk about the secondary, because I think we'll talk about that, we'll talk a little bit about, kind of the last big positive that we wanted to have, that I wanted to spotlight, at least in this game. 25 carries for Washington State for 53 rushing yards. This Oregon rush defense, run defense, is legit. It's absolutely legit. And that starts at the point of attack. So we got to give some props to Tony Tuioti. Those pieces that he brought in through the transfer portal, notably Jordan Riley and Casey Rogers coming over from Nebraska, but also Brandon Dorless, Keon Ware-Hudson, guys like that. They've really made it a point to attack the line of scrimmage. They've done a great job doing some of their stunts and noting their assignments. So it really feels like, not counting special teams, it kind of feels like Oregon's like 3/4 of the way there, if that makes sense. They can run the ball, they can pass the ball, they can defend the run, but you're still missing the pass defense for sure. So I think that kind of is a good segue to Mike's comment here, because I know you've been talking about this. Mike says this defense has 3 problems: no speed on the edge, spotty rush, and a questionable secondary. I don't know if I agree with all of these, But I know the point that you and I kind of wanted to get into is the questionable secondary, because there's talent there, but it hasn't been playing to the level that it needs to. And Lanning wasn't specifically talking about the secondary. He was saying overall, this isn't enough for us as a team to kind of get where we want to go. And I think with our conversation on the defense, I think the secondary is probably one of those biggest question marks right now and concerns for us.
Yeah, I agree with you there, Max. For this comment from Mike, I think they've been doing better on a lot of things, being able to defend the edges, being able to hold there. The pass rush, I would agree, to the first 3 weeks of the season, it wasn't really much there. However, now I think we may finally be able to start seeing that more.
It's a start.
Yeah, it's a start.
I don't think it's
not
there
where
yet.
not where they want it to be, but it's a start, which is better than nothing, quite frankly. And then the secondary, I think that was the biggest thing. I mean, you saw that Washington State was airing it out, and I think a lot of these other teams that Oregon's going to face later down the line, including UW later in the season, and most likely Utah as well. Both games of which will be at Autzen later this year, but we both know that those are also much later in the season when teams are looking to get will most likely be a lot better. And for this Oregon defense, I mean, they were, I think, in bend don't break mode. They were there, I think, holding on as long as they can, and they did what they could. I'm not saying by any means they did great, but they did what they had to do in order to help get this win. I think in a lot of other cases, the offense and the D line helped bail them out a little bit. But I think they need to be more aggressive, not lose guys on those deep rushes, which seemed like they were doing what happened a few times during this Washington State game, and even in a few of these other games as well. Let those deep balls and big plays get behind the secondary, because when that happens, that's when everything starts letting loose.
Yeah, and I think for Oregon, I'm going to disagree with the no speed on the edge, because I don't think there's no speed, but it's definitely not where it needs to be. I think when we're evaluating the Oregon pass rush, what's something you can take away from this week? I think that DJ Johnson's taking another step in the right direction, and the interior line play is great on run plays, but it's not where it needs to be on pass plays. So I think that it's a positive to see DJ taking the step in the right direction, but he can't be the only guy. Like we saw this last year. Who was the only guy who could be somewhat consistent for Oregon rushing the passer last year? Kayvon Thibodeau. And then who were these guys that were looked to outside of him? It was DJ Johnson. It was Braden Swinson, guys like that. And I think that for Oregon to get where they want to be, for them to ultimately be in the position to compete for another Pac-12 title, DJ Johnson can't be the only guy. But I think it's kind of a little bit of a balancing act between the pass rush and the secondary, because if one improves, so does the other one. If Oregon can get more consistent pass rush from multiple guys, that takes pressure off of the defense. And then if Oregon can cover better, then that takes some pressure off the guys rushing the passer. And even though there were some spotty performances, I think there were some positives that we have to talk about. Triquez Bridges got an interception, who made a heck of a play. 2 interceptions now for the lead on the team, I believe, ripping the ball out on that play when they were kind of rolling over down to the ground. So even though he's getting picked on in some instances, he's capitalizing on opportunities like that. And then I think Brian Addison continues to be a pretty solid piece in rotation. We're seeing a lot of different guys coming in at safety. We're seeing, Bennett Williams, Jamal Hill, Steve Stevens, Brian Addison. So they're still figuring that piece out in the secondary, but I don't know if right now how confident we are that the secondary is going to get kind of figured out. And things aren't going to get any easier this week, Mark, because Stanford has one of the best wide receiver groups in the Pac-12 and potentially even the country. And they have some big, physical, athletic guys, and that's going to be another huge test for them this week.
Absolutely. You know, when you see when Pac-12 play comes around, um, that's just that just adds one more level on top of that. Just adds one more level on top of that. You always play harder in those Pac-12 games, and Oregon went down to the farm last year and got upset by Stanford. So this game is by no means a certainty. I mean, granted, I'm trying to see exactly what their record is this year. What Stanford's record is this year.
Stanford's record so far. Let me pull this up.
1-2. Are they?
Yeah, because they had a bye week. I think they're coming off of a bye week.
Yeah.
No. They did have a bye week already. They're 1-2. They beat Colgate.
Okay.
They lost by 13 to USC. Had a bye week, and then they lost to Washington on the road. So
last night. Yeah. Last night.
Yeah.
Keep thinking it's Monday. It's Monday, and I should be at Lanning's presser right now.
Not quite.
Not quite. No, but I think for Oregon, they're going to need to get after the quarterback. Buy some time for that, or just buy some time for that secondary to be able to get out and be able to get into coverage, and just cover the guys well. Because if they're able to cover the guys well, that makes the pass rushers' jobs a lot easier and the quarterback's jobs a lot harder. But the question is, are they able to do that? I don't know, because you're right. This isn't going to get much easier as we go through the season. Later down the season, you have Stanford, you have Washington, you have Utah, you have Oregon State. Which is who are putting together a pretty darn good season in their own right too. So the whole Pac-12 has been getting better. It seems like. Maybe they're all playing better because they all know they have to, because SC and LA are about to leave, but that's a story for another time. But I mean, Oregon's secondary, like, they have to do either a switch has to flip quickly, or something's got to happen. Otherwise, you could see more games like this, because I think a lot of the other Pac-12 teams are going to see this and be like, "This is how you beat Oregon. You take them to a full-blown shootout."
Yeah.
And that's what happened. 44-41.
Yeah, but Oregon was able to come out on top, and they made plays when it mattered. So as sloppy as a game as it was, and you didn't necessarily see what you wanted to see, certainly from the defense, they were able to come away with some big plays when it mattered most. I wanted to kind of end the show on this point, Mark, because I really like the comment and kind of just the discussion it creates. DJ says, "Look, I'll be the first one to say it. We're still recruiting the guys we need on this team. There, I said it. So now we can just accept as this as a group just gets better. We can just accept as this group just gets better game in and game out." And I think that's accurate. I think that's the point that we're getting at, is that the secondary isn't at the level that it needs to be. The defense, the team overall, but particularly on defense, I feel like it's not where it needs to be for the aspirations this program has. But look at what they're doing on the recruiting trail. In 2023, they have practically filled out their entire secondary with I think they have 5 total defensive back commits right now. Cole Martin's one that I'm super excited about. They're still going after Roderick Pleasant, the cornerback out of Gardena Serra, fastest guy in the state of California. Maybe they can get him. That'd be a huge recruiting win for Oregon. But then look at the pass rush. They have Blake Purchase. And, from some of the people that I've talked to, they believe that Blake Purchase, the edge rusher out of Colorado, could be a guy who can contribute right away as a true freshman. So the reinforcements are coming. And then you also have Jaden Moore, another big piece of that defensive line, off the edge, freak athlete type of guy. So I think I agree with this point. Oregon's still recruiting the guys that they need, but that's why it makes it fun to follow recruiting, because you're seeing the on-field product. We kind of see some of the weaknesses, some of the deficiencies, and then how over here on the recruiting trail are they working to address those needs? How do the guys that they have and the guy in the fold and the guys that they're looking to get help them get to the place that they want to be, help them get that dependable 2 deep and have guys that if someone comes out, there's no drop off, because that's certainly not where they're at right now.
Yeah, I think a lot of Oregon fans, and for fans of a program, this isn't always a bad thing to see. It's like you're always so used to seeing a program making those deep runs. In Oregon's case, trying to make Rose Bowls, trying now to make college football playoffs. That you think that anything less than that is a failure for the season. And in this case, you have a new coaching staff, you have a new quarterback, you have a younger secondary. Like I think quite frankly, I think anybody who thought that Oregon was going to make a run at the college football playoff may have been kidding themselves, just due to the fact that, number one, this team is in a bit of a redevelopment mode with the new coaching staff, and number two, the Pac-12 doesn't get much respect, really. Like the Pac-12 has only had three participants in the college football playoff since it started. Oregon, Washington. Oh no, it's just two so far, Oregon and Washington. And then you have potentially now two this year in both Utah and SC, though I would more likely take SC in that match, or between the two of them. But Oregon, I think, yeah, they need to recruit. Recruiting takes time. It'll take a good 3 years at the minimum, I think, for Lanning to really get 2 to 3 years. I think at the very minimum for Lanning to really get most of his guys into this program. And then we can be talking about that more. But I think at this point right now, not really.
Yeah, so it's a work in progress. And I think that this kind of contributes to the bigger point, and we don't have to get into this right now because I think we got to get out of here, but it's so interesting, the timing of Lanning's hire and everything that's going on, right? Like, Mario left this team in a better place than when he got it as head coach. Whether you like Mario Cristobal or not, that is factual. Did he coach the Ducks out of some games? Sure. They could have won some games with some different coaching calls, but he proved that you can recruit at a super high level across the country. And then when Lanning comes in, Oregon's still in the midst of that championship window. This is Lanning's first head coaching gig. You got NIL. You got transfer portal. Like, there's so much craziness going on in college football, but that's a whole other discussion. Mark, I hate to cover, I hate to cut this short, but just any final remarks before we get out of here, because I got to catch this Niners game.
No, not really any. I want to catch that Niners game too, though I don't have cable, so I'll have to find another way to catch that game.
All right, well, we're gonna get out of here, you guys. If you want to find more of Mark's work, you can follow him on Twitter at MarkW2016. You can also find his written work on DucksDigest.com. If you want to find more of me, follow me on Twitter at mtorresports, and subscribe to the YouTube channel at Oregon Football Max Torres. It's been awesome seeing the support and seeing this thing grow. And then do us a favor, just take a second and share the Ducks Dish podcast. As you can see with these live chats and the live comments, we got people that show up, at every show. They don't miss anything, and it's just so great to see. And I love doing this. And man, do we have a big week with Stanford on tap coming to Eugene for week 5. But that'll do it for us here on this episode of the Ducks Dish podcast. Thanks to Mark for hopping on. Thanks to you guys for tuning in. And we will see you guys in the next episode of the Ducks Dish podcast.